There are a lot of young people who grew up in farming communities but would not make farming a career choice. Emmanuel Twene used to be one of such young folks, but today he has no regrets choosing farming and agribusiness over being a member of the Unemployed Graduates Association.
Growing up in the farming community, somewhere in the Brongahafo, Njobu to be precise, we saw what our parents were doing when growing up. But then, we needed to add some little swag, as I'll say it, to it to make it more attractive. And so, even though it wasn't what I learned in school, it wasn't what I wanted to do while I was growing up. But then, as I grew, I realized that there are some potentials, there are so many potentials in this space that are untapped yet. And so, I saw it as an opportunity to take it up and then make something reasonable out of it. And that is what has brought me this far.
Emmanuel gave agribusiness a shot while studying as a biological science student and has been worth it.
I did general science in senior high school, as Doma Secondary School in the Brongahafo region. And then, like we say, as science students, we always, dreaming of being a doctor and stuff like that. But then, as we go on, the dreams start changing. So in the university, I went and read biological science, where I majored in conservation biology and entomology. While studying, I picked some interest in agri, but then it wasn't to go into it full time as a business, but just for the fun side of it. But then as time went on, I realized that day in and day out, there were opportunities in this space that could be tapped or that are untapped. So I wanted to take advantage of it. And also seeing some graduates, graduate from school and then having a whole lot of challenges, getting employment and stuff like that. It's rather motivated me that, okay, why not try and then do something for myself so that I wouldn't have to come and join the Unemployed Graduates Association of Ghana, So we started from there. In fact, I've been doing this since 2020 fully. So 2019 to 2020, I was doing my service and then, right after the service, I went into it fully.
Just like entrepreneurs, agripreneurs never give up. If it fails and they have to start all over again, they will.
When I was in the 300, I heard about snail farming. I come for a training at Achatina. And so I started a small one in the backyard at home. In fact, they laid a lot, the eggs hatched a lot, but then unfortunately they were in boxes and they were hanging. So they were outside also, so the rains and stuff like that, it broke it. So by the time I returned from school, the boxes had broken and all the snails had left. And so when I was in the service, I moved to Ayukuma. At least I had some little experience from what I did back in the house, and so I was replicating some of the experiences I had at Ayukuma. And so even whilst I was doing that, I realized that the interest of people were going up. People needed to learn more, so people were coming around. People were calling for deliveries to be made to them and all that. So I realized that this is something I can do full time, and then it's going to pay off. And I read an article where realized that we consume about 20,000 tons of snails every year in Ghana, and out of this, 15,000 tons comes from Ivory Coast, and then we have only 5,000 tons coming from Ghana, which is woefully inadequate. When we are talking about reducing import and increasing export, that means there's a huge potential for it. And so right after the service, I went straight into doing it full time. It's paying off, and I know it's going to pay off bigger in the very near future.
With the bigger picture in mind and the requirement of a little to no capital, Emmanuel started Ket Organic Farms and Consult with a few pieces of snails.
Ket Organic Farms and Consult actually started with a vision of providing or producing low cholesterol protein foods for individuals or for people to consume. And then being in the health sector too for a while, I realized that day in and day out, people are complaining about obesity, people are complaining about diabetes, hypertension, and all these. And it's all attributed to our foods that we consume, and so we're looking at producing these foods all year round. And so that was in fact one of the major reasons why we did a snail farming, because we realized that it's low in calories and cholesterol and all that. So we started with that, and then along the line we realized that we can't just have one choice for people. At least you need to have, you know, diverse foods for people, or different ones that people can choose from. And so we added mushrooms to it. We realized that mushrooms too are very low in cholesterol, has all the proteins, has all the fiber that we need. Along the line we also realized that people want to eat fish, but one, the consistency, and then two, the hygienic conditions of it. So we said, okay, why not go into fish processing? So then we buy fresh fish, tilapia, catfish from farmers, and then we add value to it by, you know, processing them or by smoking them under very hygienic conditions. And then, you know, now people, when someone wants to buy agribusiness, normally the person will have to travel to the market. Or we say here, you know, delivering to you at the comfort of your home. So you can even be in the office, you order online, or you make an order, we send it to you in the house, and then you can have your, you know, your weekend either like soup or abemkwai prepared neatly with your agribusiness, with your emre, with your enwa.
There are over 43,000 species of snails in the world, and they are categorized into land snails, sea snails, and freshwater snails. They can be identified by their different diets, habitats, and unique shapes.
We have different types of snails, but then for what we consume here in Ghana, there are two major types that we consume here in Ghana. We have the AA, and then we have the AM. The market will determine what type of snail you would want to do. So these are the AMs. Now this basically we see them mostly in Nigeria. When Nigerians farm this mostly, but they prefer this to the AA. So the difference are that the AMs, or what we call achatina marginata, or in P, pobrenwa, it has a shorter shell. A shorter and a rounded shell. The meat looks a bit darker, and then the shell looks very hard. The shell is harder than all the types of snails. So this is what we call, or this is what we have as AMs. This is what we call the AA, mwapa to precise. I realize that when you compare this to this, and this has a rounded shell, and this has a sharp end shell. And when we look at the colors, this looks more brighter than this. So this is the AA, the achatina or mwapa, as it's called in P. This is mostly consumed, and so in most cases people would say that let's farm AA. Yeah, it is true because it has a huge market. But then AM also has its own market. Only that the value placed on AA is not as much as it is for AM. So when you compare the two, realize that the meats are a bit different. AM has a bit darker meat or body, and then the AA has a bit whitish body. So there's another type, which is the fulica. Now fulica is what usually say when it rains, we see them mostly around. So when it rains, we realize that they're just in the environment everywhere, moving everywhere. Those are the AFs, achatina fulica. Their rate of multiplication is higher compared to these other two. Now, the reason why we don't farm them all, people don't really give attention to it. Even though the taste and everything just tastes just like these two other snails, because they're just around us, found in gutters and places like that, people really do not give an attention to it. However, a time is coming where AF will be of even more value than these ones that we have, because when it comes to the slime, you can get it more in larger quantities with the AF. And so I always tell people that if you live in an area where you can easily find AF, just collect them, put them into a box. For them, taking care of them is not as difficult as doing for AA. So you can just, any food you get, just throw it into it for them. Don't pay much attention to them. They will still reproduce and they increase in number for you. And when the time is due for us to start doing the extraction, you'll have a lot of money coming from that end also. Yeah, so these are the main 3 types that we have available here in Ghana at the moment. And if you are asked that if you want to farm, I would recommend that at least you can farm all these 3.
What does it take to start a snail farm?
Farming is not one thing that is strict. There are so many ways that you can go about it. And so there are people who would want to start a snail farm from Katai. There are others that will say, oh, I have some tank B, so I want to use it. The others that will say that, oh, I have some space under some corridor that I want to start my farm from there. For instance, myself, I started from boxes. Now the reason why I decided from boxes was because I wasn't owning these lands, so I couldn't do anything permanent. So I needed to do stuff that when it happens I need to move it, I can easily move it. And so if you want to start a snail farm, it depends. One, I would say it depends on your location, the availability of the land. Is it something that you can use for a long period or it's just for a short while? It depends on what or how much you have at hand. That will determine how you want to start your snail farm. So like I mentioned, I started with the boxes. Some will go straight into galleries. That's using the blocks to construct the pens. That way you know that you're doing a more permanent structure which should last you a very long time. Snails would want a very cool place devoid of heat and all that. Maybe if all the capital I have is just say 500 cedis to start my farm, I can get some board from these masons that have used the board and they're no more using it. I get it, do my own box, get some snails and buy, and then put them in it and start my farm from there. You know, so it really depends on you and how big or how small you want to start it. The others that will say, oh, I want to start a snail farm, but I want to start on a smaller scale. I want to start from a greenhouse, because then that is stress-free and all that. You don't have to put in feed, you don't have to really worry about their care because they take care of themselves inside the greenhouse. So there are some that will prefer that to having to do the pens and to do the boxes.
Unique with snails is the ability to mate and fertilize each other. There are no male or female snails. Every snail has the ability to lay eggs.
A snail is ready to lay when you see that white spot on its body. So usually during the rainy season, you see it a lot on the snails. That is where they mate through and that is where they lay through. Interesting is snails are hermaphrodites. So let's assume that you have 50 snails in your house, and then if you are all ready to lay, all 50 will lay eggs for you.
Snail eggs are often white with a viscous layer that serves as a protection. After snails are laid, it will take about 3 to 4 weeks for the eggs to hatch.
Snails that are about 9 months, 10 months, a year, 1.5 years are ready to lay. Now when they lay, from 21 days going, the eggs will start hatching if you have a right environment for it. So for us, we use these baskets as a hatchery. So we put some soil into it, so we ensure that the environment or the temperatures here or the moisture content here is able to support the hatching of the egg.
Land snails like achatina, achatina marginata, and achatina fulica can lay eggs once every month.
We have 5 greenhouses in Asamankese. So once they hatch, I transport them to Asamankese and then deposit them into that farm. At that age, they need a lot too much attention to be given to them. And so we give them more of the contomere, we give them more of the watermelons. We ensure that the place is always humid as compared to, you know, an area where the sun will penetrate them, because at that point their shells have not really formed that well. So you don't leave them, expose them to so much stress, to so much heat. When it happens that way, it's going to be very difficult for your snails to survive. But then let's say you started with a box, and then you have, say, about 50 snails in that box where you are keeping your snails. Now, when they start laying, at least you need to create an extra box in addition for it. So the extra box now becomes where you're going to be hatching your eggs. So you pick this eggs from the parent and then you deposit it into the box where you're hatching it. You should also have another extra box. Now this extra box is for you to do what we call segregation. So then you know that there are some that are maybe as big as my thumb, but then if they're all, you know, packed into one box where you are feeding all of them with the same food, definitely the bigger ones to keep on becoming bigger and the smaller ones to remain the same. And so you keep on, you know, separating them according to their sizes. So in my case, when I started in the I started with just one box. But then by the end of the year, I had about 8 boxes. And one other thing is that the more you keep the snails together, as in you have a lot of them put together in one point, at one point, cannibalism may occur in snails. So they may start feeding on each other. If they are lacking protein, they will start feeding on each other for the protein. If they are lacking some calcium, they start feeding on each other for calcium.
Calcium is a crucial mineral in a snail's life cycle.
Calcium is what is used in building their shells, and so they need a lot of calcium in their food. So either you're giving them the raw oyster shell calcium, or you're giving them the eggshell or the snail shell. So realize that in here we have some empty shells. Now these empty shells are snails that we deshelled and then we brought the shells here for the snails in here to also feed on the shells. So realize that we have a lot of the empty shells put in here, and then in the feeding you can see here this is being consumed by a snail. This is bringing to the point of feeding in snails. So they feed on virtually everything apart from salty food, and so you realize that people will say, oh, they eat contomere. Yes, they eat contomere, but not just the contomere, the stalk. So you realize that here they've eaten all that part. They will climb up and then eat it. Also here, the ones that have eaten it up like that. So it's not just the contomere leaf itself, but then the stalk. So if you have a farm, or maybe you are doing it in a box, and then you want to feed your snails, and then you happen to have some of the cocoyam in the house, you don't just go and then cut the leaf. You can cut from the base and then give the whole stalk and then the leaf to them. In fact, they prefer the stalk even more than the leaf because of the water in the stalk. And you realize that they're moving on the leaf. So as they move on it, they lick it and then they start eating it up like that. Yeah, so as far as it's succulent, it is fresh to consume it. You realize that we bring even eggshells here so that they will feed on it. In fact, they were wholesome, but you can see that now they're breaking apart. That means, you know, as they move on it, they feed on it as well. These were fruit that we brought in, I think about 2 days ago. This is a mango, and you can see that they've eaten a part of it. They've eaten almost everything. You can see this pineapple, they've eaten part of it. Watermelon, everything is gone. No, it's now just the paper. When you see this one, it's just they've consumed everything within, and it's left with just the paper. All right. So this to tell us that feeding them is not difficult. Any household waste that you have, be it vegetables, be it fruit, pawpaw, dandelion. So you don't really necessarily have to spend so much on their feeding. You just have to ensure that whatever thing that you're eating, as far as there's no salt in it, you can bring it to your snails for your snails to feed on it. You may not even necessarily have to go and buy the oyster shell. You can dry your own eggshells dry it, grind it, and then give it to your snails, and your snails would feed on it, especially the juveniles, because they are the ones that need the calcium the most for them to be able to build their shells. What happens if you don't give them the shell is that they'll have a very light shell, and so any little pressure will cause the shells to break.
So, a graduate decides to pursue an interest in snail farming, and in just 2 years, he has been able to employ 5 more workers amidst challenges with land acquisition.
So the benefits of snail farming are enormous. Personally, it's employing me, and through snail farming, I've been able to employ 5 more people. So at least snail farming is employing 6 people, and 5 of these 5, 2 of them are graduates. And so at least if the snail farming can pay a graduate, then it means it's something good. It's creating that employment opportunities for us. There are health benefits to snails. Okay, so not just about the farming itself, but then the meat is also serving a great purpose. Then apart from that, the cooking part of it, which we know is the slime. There are machines that have been developed for snails to extract the slime. The Mucus Pro. So you put the snail into the machine, it agitates the snail for it to extract the slime for you, and then it has a collector, so it collects the slime, and then now you pick your snails and bring them back to the farm.
There has been a growing scientific interest in the familiar sticky trail of slime snails leave behind in their movement and the medicinal value it may contain. Snail slime has always been used in cosmetics and medicine for skin and wounds. The slime is believed to have moisturizing, regenerative, soothing, exfoliating, lightening, purifying, normalizing, and anti-aging properties.
When you go to places like Nigeria, for instance, there are people who are selling the blood because it's full of ions. So for kids who are, even adults who are lacking iron in their system and all that, it's for them. That aspect alone is a business on its own. That's the value addition. And then when we come to the shell, we can give some of the shells to the snails to feed on. Any other animal that we feed it, like piggery, poultry and stuff, we can still have the shell broken into pieces and then given to them to feed on it. When you apply the powdered form of the snail shell as a vegetable farmer, you apply it to your vegetable plant. The fruits that will come are very firm because of the calcium content of it, and then it's able to hold onto the stalk. And if you're able to get it in larger quantities, in fact, the paint factory industry also buys it as calcium in their mixes.
If you grew up in a typical African home like Twene Emmanuel, you would know that it would take a very stubborn conviction to go against your family's wish and decide to start a snail farm with no capital other than seek a white-collar job as a graduate.
Growing up from a farming community where we knew farmers are these old people with no education, live in poverty and stuff like that, some family members were thinking that was going to be my fate as well. So, they were against it. Having to convince, especially some of my brothers, that this is what I want to do was a problem. So at a point in time, I just had to, close my eyes, close my ears to everything, and then just say, this is what I want to do. So I want to focus on it. So that was the major challenge.
With the knowledge that Ghana consumes about 15,000 tons of snails, but unfortunately, 13,000 tons comes from neighboring Ivory Coast, should be enough motivation to get you starting your snail farm, because the market is actually waiting for you.
So I had an apartment where I was staying, where I was in the service, and it has a bigger space, and so I was able to use that space. But then now the service has ended, and so you need to get your own space. I moved it to AGROMEDIA, and then in AGROMEDIA I spent less than 6 months. The owner of the land wanted it back, so I was supplying my snails and mushrooms to someone, and the person came to the farm to see what we were doing. So I told her my challenge, that my major challenge was land issues. So she mentioned that, oh, I have some plots in Bechele, and that's a Apollonia area, and that she could give it out to me to use. It was a welcoming news for me, so I accepted that, okay, I would appreciate it. So we went there, do all the checks, and then it was fit for what I wanted to use it for. And then again, I didn't have any contractual agreement with her, but then it was by word of mouth that, oh, I'm not going to use the space in the next 5 to 10 years. So you can use it as long as you want to. Initially, I was using boxes so that when they say I should move, I can easily move the box and then off I go. But at this time on, because of the assurance that I rather was doing the galleries with the blocks. So I did about 20 pens with the blocks. So I was there in April 2021, and then February 2022, I was called that there was a casualty on the farm where the wind had broken the structures. The container we're using for office and stuff the roof has been ripped off. So I was there when the owner of the land called that, oh, she heard that my structure has broken down, so she wouldn't want me to reconstruct it. She wants me to move. In fact, it was a very big blow to me during that time.
Just imagine having to go against your family's wish of starting life in the corporate world and facing such harsh challenges. Would you have packed up and throw everything about snail farming away, clean up your CV and go job hunting, or follow in Emmanuel's footsteps by not giving up?
So now I had to break all the 20 pens that I had made, move everything from there, and then now search for new lands where I'm going to farm. And God being so good, I have a friend who is into real estate, and then he got me this space for us to be here. So even this is something that the business has been is able to pay for. So between 2020 to the end of 2021, we had moved to 3 different locations, and all these locations we put up structures to start a farm. And then in no time, you're told we need our land. So you need to break everything that you have and then move it to another location. So that has been the journey so far to this time. But then I think it's a journey worth it, because when I look at the future, when I look at the plans, it makes me so happy. And then when you ask me 10,000 times, this is still what I would want to do. Yeah.
Our purpose as AGROMEDIA is to ignite that spark in you to take up that agribusiness journey, whether you are unemployed or not. There is definitely a convenient venture that you can start. Let's grow and eat what we grow.
We offer trainings, we offer farm setup services, we offer farm management services. So probably if you started a farm but then really getting the response you're supposed to get from the farm hands and all that, just let us know. We'll come in and then put the right things in place. We also offer, agribusiness consulting services. So maybe you want to invest into agribusiness, but you have a whole lot of things on your mind. You don't even know where to start, where to end and all that. Don't worry, just talk to us.